Okay, I've made it to the bottom of the falls, and by geez, what a walk in it was. It's pretty taxing to get to this location. I think today, this afternoon, the light is just about perfect for waterfall photography, and I'll explain to you why in a moment. But as you can see behind me here, we have this marvellous waterfall with a sort of like a cutout into the rock. And it's got this beautiful gold sheen on it. Quite a spectacular place really, but this is heavy country here. It's a bit chaotic around me. Quite frankly, I think they might have filmed a part of Predator here or something, because by geez, it's rugged ground here. But what we'll do, we'll set up, but before we do that, I'll move a bit closer and I'll explain to you, or pass on a few tips to you on how to photograph these waterfalls, and what to look out for, and what to strive to achieve, so to speak. So I'll have another drink and we'll get started. Okay, a little bit of education now. First up, welcome back to the channel, and thank you for wanting to watch this video. What I want to convey with you today is a few things to look out for, and what to do when you want to photograph waterfalls. Now, the very first thing that I suggest you do is to arrive at your location early, because if you do that, like here, you'll have the place all to yourself. You won't have people interrupting you or accidentally getting in your shot. So if you arrive or plan on arriving at your destination early, that is a very, very good thing to do. The next important thing is light. Now, I've been chasing light for years and years and years, and to me that's what photography is about. It's about light, followed closely by composition. Now, the light that you need is probably what I've got here today. It's a bit cloudy, a bit overcast. There's no filtered light here because of the tree canopy that I'm under. As I said, it's like a jungle here. But most waterfalls photograph very, very well when it's sort of like you've got a dark sky or a cloudy sky or overcast conditions. Filtered light is okay in some circumstances, but I find that if you've got filtered light coming in from either direction or either side or from the top of the waterfall, you do struggle to get your exposure right, just to nail it right. It becomes quite difficult, and then you have to go into the process of image stacking and focus stacking and all this sort of stuff. And as I always say, 90% in camera, 10% on a computer. So light is very, very important. Try and plan your trip around overcast conditions. Get to know the weather. I'm a weather fanatic. I look at the weather every day. In actual fact, if you're planning to shoot a waterfall any given day, you want to study the weather 3 or 4 days out before you actually arrive at your location to photograph the waterfall, because that will dictate as to how your images will be, or how your workflow will be when you're trying to photograph these magnificent pieces of natural structure. So light is very, very important. The next thing is to, well, I've noticed that people that come to my workshops and I take them to places like this, they take one look at the waterfall and they go, wow, look at that, how good's that? And they set up their tripod and all they do is photograph the waterfall. Not really the best thing to do, because you're limiting yourself. So basically what you're looking for is, before you even set up your camera on a tripod, you're looking for composition, working with the light, but you're also looking for layers. You've got to layer your image. In other words, drag the viewer's eye into the image. Now, this waterfall here doesn't have much foreground element, which is okay. I can get around that a bit later on and I'll show you how I'll do that. But there's a natural frame between the trees, which I will show you in a moment. So you're looking for layers in your photography, in your image. You're looking for clues. Once again, you're a detective. You're looking for clues, you're looking for photographic clues. So have a look around. walk around like I just did a minute ago, and look around and look at the composition. Regardless of being at this location before, there could be something that you missed, or the light might be doing something different. So have a good look around before you set your camera up on the tripod, and take your time. That's another thing, take your time. This waterfall's not going anywhere, it's going to be there forever. So just take your time, slow down, and enjoy the experience. But you must. It's very important to have a look around first before you set your camera up on a tripod to take those marvellous shots. Look for clues, look for composition, and look for layers within that image. Okay, I'll set the camera up now and take a couple of shots, and I'll explain the settings that I'll be using here, and we'll go from there. Okay, I've got the first composition ready to go. As you can see it in the frame here. I've got this tree and branches coming left to right. Now, usually with photography, we don't want anything encroaching into the scene from either left or right of the frame. But in this case, I'm using the trees and the foliage as a natural frame, and that just makes the picture a little bit more appealing, because as you can probably see in there's not much interest in the foreground. A little bit of water rushing off, and there's a pool over there. But as I said, the layers of this image are the trees either side, the water running down through the middle, the pond or the pool at the base of the waterfall, and the waterfall itself. In actual fact, the waterfall is probably 1/10 of the equation here. It's everything around it that I'm trying to bring into the scene, to frame it naturally. Now, luckily for me, there's no breeze here. If there was a bit of a breeze here, I'd have to probably focus stack this image, where I'd take one shot of the branches and trees at a higher shutter speed to freeze the motion or the movement of the leaves and the branches. Then I'd go back or revert back to my normal settings for the midground and background. So, but at this stage I don't have to do that. Thank God for that. I can start taking images now, and we'll get on with it. Another tip with waterfall photography, it pays to get in the water, and as you can see, I'm standing in the water here. So I suggest you get yourself a good pair of waterproof boots, gum boots, or wellies as the English people call them, or some sort of boot that's waterproof. I've got various pairs of waterproof boots, and it all depends where I'm going, but the normal garden variety that I'm wearing today is okay in this location. It just gives you a bit more scope, and you can actually get into the water, protects your legs from leeches. Another good thing that you should know, wear long pants, wear long socks, and tuck the pants into the socks, then put them inside your waterproof boots. That way you do not have a problem with leeches. And I know they're here, I've seen them. So, but safety first. Get in the water with your tripod, wear a good pair of waterproof boots. As long as you're safe, you can get shots like this. Most people photograph waterfalls from the left or the right. It all depends which way the track leads to the waterfall. But it's good to actually get in amongst the water, immerse yourself basically into the landscape. So that's what I've done here. I'll take this shot, and then I'll explain the settings to you. Pretty good afternoon. Okay, the settings for this shot. I'm currently at 1 second. Aperture is f11 for the depth of field, and my ISO is 100. Now, if you're to understand photography and how photography works, there's a thing we call the exposure triangle. Triangle, up the top you've got ISO, this side you've got aperture, and this side you've got shutter speed. The ISO is how sensitive is your sensor to accepting light into the camera. The aperture controls the leaves inside the lens, opening and closing, which dictates your shutter speed and your depth of field. And the exposure is controlled by the aperture. So the more you close it down, the slower your shutter speed will be. So learn the exposure triangle: ISO, aperture and shutter speed. Shutter speed can vary with waterfalls. I like to shoot anywhere between 1 second and 8 seconds. It all depends on what the light's doing. Now with light, in photography there's no such thing as bad light. It's just bad choices of composition to work with the light that you currently have. So for this shot, we're looking at 1 second, f11, ISO 100. Now I'm shooting at I'm shooting at 20mm on a full frame camera. So that's giving me a lot of foreground element with the water running down and the trees and the branches that I'm using as a natural frame. So 2 second timer, we'll take this shot. Now we'll have a look at that. Pretty good. Now I suggest you learn to shoot in manual and shoot in RAW. Now the reason being, RAW is a way of capturing all the data onto your through your sensor, and that way when you put it into an editing process you can drag out all that information. If you shoot with JPEG, the camera's doing it for you. In actual fact, the camera's editing the image for you. Nothing wrong with that, as I said, but if you're serious about this type of photography, try and shoot in RAW and then learn the process of editing, which is another field once again. I also suggest you shoot in manual. That way you've got full control over this black box here. You can control everything that's going on in your camera. The shutter speed, the aperture, the ISO, you can control all that if you shoot in manual. And I also manual focus. Now on most modern day cameras we have a button or a function. It looks like a tennis racket really, but it's more like a magnifying glass. What I do, I look at the scene and I push the button and I bring it in, and then I manual focus on that, and that way I know I'm in total focus control. That means the image is pin sharp, and it's very important to get it pin sharp. So manual focus, manual control of your camera so you can control everything, because when you're in manual you can control your shutter speed, your aperture, your ISO, and you can play around with it. As I said, this waterfall's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's running, the water's running, but the actual waterfall's just not going anywhere. So take your time. Where else would you be? It's fantastic. Take your time, learn your camera, how to do it in manual, and I think you'll find that your photography will just jump off the page. We'll take a few more shots. Okay, as you can see, I've got the camera down in a low position. I've spread the legs out on the tripod, and the reason for that is that I'm trying to emphasize the actual size of this waterfall and the foreground, getting lower to the foreground. It just draws the eye into the image. This basically is what we call a leading line, really. It's a natural leading line, so don't be afraid to get your tripod in the water and spread that tripod out a bit, get that camera down low for a different angle. Once again, we're looking for composition, and we're looking for layers within the image. So another good tip, get your tripod down very low. Now my settings have changed a little bit. I'm now at 4-second exposure, f11, and I've got the ISO at 200 because I looked at the histogram and I was a little bit too far to the left. That's another tip for you. Try and get to know what the histogram is and what it's used for in photography. Too much to the left, that means your image is, you've got dark, you've got shadows. Too much to the right is too white or too bright. So left is dark, right is white. Very simple to understand and remember, but you've got to study it. I'm looking at the graph now for the histogram, and it's just off to the left and just off to the right. So that's telling me the exposure's pretty well right. I'll take this shot. That's pretty good, but unfortunately I'm finding now that the actual water is slightly overexposed. So what I have to do now, I'm going to bring down my exposure. Now the histogram is now saying that I'm too far to the left, so what I'll do, I'm pushing my exposure up to around about about 2 seconds. We'll take that shot and see what I get. Much better, because I've managed to reduce the time that the shutter is open, which renders the actual waterfall or the actual water not so overexposed, because that's a blown highlight. Whenever you photograph waterfalls, the water is the blown highlight. Now here's another tip. To find out where the highlights are in an image, all you have to do, and this is very simple, it was taught to me many years ago, and you might think this is ridiculous, but just squint your eyes. Just squint your eyes, or cover one eye and squint the other one, and anything that's in your vision that's very bright, that's the highlight. Very simple trick. Squint your eyes like that, or cover it like that, and squint with the eye that's open. Look at the scene, and anything bright, that means that that's the overexposed part, or the brightness, or the brightest part of your image. Another free tip there. Okay, if you're struggling to get the required shutter speed, you can use a neutral density filter. I've just put my Nissi CPL, circular polarizer. You can use a neutral density filter as well, but in this instance I don't need that full filtration, so I'm using a CPL, a circular polarizer. What that effectively does, it gives me one less stop if I crank it to about 50%, and if I crank it right up, I'm almost gaining or losing actually 2 stops of light, which enables me then to get the required shutter speed. So I've got the circular polarizer on, and when you call it up on your live view with your histogram and you start turning the circular polarizer, you can actually see a histogram moving left to right. So a piece of kit that I think you should buy for this type of photography is a circular polarizer. Try and get a good one, spend a bit of money and get a good circular polarizer, and that's probably, for waterfalls, probably about the only filter you need. And then if you think you need something a bit stronger, then you can look into your neutral density filters, anywhere from 3 stop up to 15 stops. I've got them, but in this case I don't need them today. I just want to take the sheen off the rocks and bring out the colour of the ferns and the trees that are surrounding the waterfall. Another good thing that I think you should have is a very good tripod. Spend the money. I know they're expensive. I see lots of people that come to my workshops, they turn up with $4,000 and $5,000 cameras and they have a $100 tripod. That's madness. I think after a while you'd probably buy 3 or 4 cheap tripods, and in the end all the money you've spent could have gone towards one good one. So get a very good tripod to stabilize your camera. And I'm in water here, so there's a bit of movement, but a good heavy tripod saves you, will save the day. So circular polarizer and a very, very good tripod. Also too, where is it? A cloth, lens cleaning cloth. Every now and again, just give the front of your lens a bit of a wipe, because you do get spray coming off the waterfalls. So that's about it really that you need for your waterfall photography. Good tripod, good circular polarizer, some good wet weather boots, and just take your time. Just take your time and enjoy what nature's given us here. Well, it's getting a bit late now, and I don't want to be caught in the dark coming out of here, because by geez, I'm looking at the walk back up here, and it's a monster. It's a real monster of a walk. But anyway, it is what it is. Plus it's Easter, and I might eat some chocolate this weekend. So doing a bit of sweating coming out of this gorge might just pay off. One last tip I can give you about waterfall photography. Usually it's a thing called V-light. V-light. What that is the sky at the top of the waterfall, which form like a V between all the foliage. This is where you need a cloudy, overcast day, because sometimes the sky in a waterfall looks quite good. But if it's too bright at the top of the waterfall, it plays havoc with your exposures. So what I usually do, I usually crop that out inside the camera. I don't have the sky in the image at all. So be very wary of what we call the V-light. That can play havoc with your exposure. So I hope you find this video helpful to you. As I said, all waterfalls aren't the same, but the principles remain the same when it comes to photographing them. So take those tips away, practice, enjoy your waterfall photography, and basically that's it for another episode of Sniper Photography. I've got a bit of a walk out here now, and I'll enjoy the nightly meal when I get back home. So thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button and the bell next door so you don't miss anything. I really appreciate your support. But that's it for another waterfall tutorial here with Sniper Photography. And as I always say, be nice to yourself, family and friends, but most of all, you keep shooting. Happy Easter, and bye for now.